What's up, fellow modelers? Will here. Welcome to Modeling from the Engine's Chair. So this is not the official start to my Bird of Prey build. I'm still waiting on a couple of things. I'm waiting on I got the lighting kit from Madman Lighting, and I'm waiting on the lighting kit from I think Stellar Effects. So I've got two different lighting kits I'm going to be looking at. One's going to be the Stellar Effects one is going to be what I use for my larger printable Bird of Prey, which is what we're going to be looking at in this video. And the Madman lighting, which actually comes from Tenna Controls now, is going to be for my smaller 1-350 Bird of Prey build. So at any rate, I just wanted to do a video. I've been kind of testing. I haven't done any weathering before. I've never weathered anything. So I really wanted to weather the Bird of Prey because that's really the way the stage, or not stage, but studio model looked. It was very weathered and worn down looking, and very dirty models. So I kind of want to try to reproduce as much of that as possible on the models as I build them. So I've been practicing this on my printed larger Bird of Prey, and kind of trying to get the technique down and see what techniques work best for me, and kind of get an idea of what I want to do when I go to do the smaller version. But at any rate, so I'm going to be talking about weathering this part here, which I believe is part of the cloaking. It's like a cloaking coil or something like that is what I've seen it listed as on the diagrams. But anyway, I'm going to be doing that, and this is kind of what the head of this looks like right now. And let me see if I can kind of focus that a little bit better. And there you go. So you can see the weathering I've done on that, and yep, going the wrong way. And I think it's turning out pretty good so far. So that's what I'll be talking about in this episode, is just kind of going over, there's really two main techniques I'm using to weather. I'm trying to keep it simple, and also the paints I'm trying to keep simple as well. So I'll talk about those in this episode. I'm still using craft paints. That's kind of what I've settled onto. And again, I got to thank Boyd over at TrekWorks for recommending craft paints, because that's kind of my go-to now. I don't even use a lot of the model specific paints. It's just so much easier to go up to the Hobby Lobby or Michael's or that and get some paints that look pretty dang close to. There's so many paints to select from that you can usually find something that's a pretty close match to what you need. I am doing a little bit of mixing in this video, and I'll talk about the ratios I'm using, but they're very simple. I'm using 2 or 3, maybe 4 basic colors to do this model with. So at any rate, I'm going to go into that in this video, and once my other parts come in, we'll look at starting on that 1-350 build. I'm kind of looking at keeping these videos separate. This one, my printed one, I'm calling the Big Bird, and the smaller 1-350 will be the Little Bird. So that's how I'll kind of keep these separated out when I need to. There will be some crossing over just because there's some things that they will have in common. So at any rate, bear with me. Give me a minute. I'm going to put you on the bench. We'll get to work. All right, guys, so here's kind of what I'm doing right now. I've never really done any kind of weathering, and this model is going to call for, to get it looking authentic as possible, it's going to call for a lot of weathering work. So what I decided to do is I'm going to start with I forget what this part is officially called, but I'm going to start with this part that goes in the front. And what I've done so far is I've done the cleaning and curing and all that, sanded some of the spots that need to be sanded where my supports were attached. And after I got it all cleaned up and ready to go, I hit it with 2 coats of this filler and sandable primer from Rust-Oleum. And this works pretty well so far, I found, with my little bit of experience working with these 3D parts. And so I sprayed that on, let that dry real good, and then I came back over it with my Deco Art Enchanted Ultra Black Base Coat paint, and put a nice base coat of black on here. And I used that along with some Pledge. I used the Pledge to dilute that. And I let that dry up real good, and once that dried up, I came in and I sprayed. I stole my wife's sprayer, don't tell her. But I sprayed some water, got this part nice and wet, and took some sea salt that I've grinded down, And while it was wet, I just took the salt and sprinkled it over it. And once I got a decent enough coating on it, I let it sit on there and let it dry up. And that's where I'm at now. This is pretty much dry. My idea is to kind of layer this with a couple different coats. I want some of the black to come through because to me, when I look at the model, there's some black, there's gray, and I want a little bit of silver to come through too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry a little bit more. There's still a couple spots where I think this needs to dry some more before I paint it. But once that dries, I've got my paint mixed up over here. This is my shimmering silver that I used on the NX-01 build. And the great thing about it is it's got a nice sheen to it without having a metallic flaky look to it. So I've mixed this up, but I've mixed this up with window cleaner, with my invisible glass window cleaner here. And I did that because I didn't want to do the pledge because I'm afraid the pledge might seal this in too well and I'll have a hard time getting the salt off after I paint it. So I decided just to do this with the window cleaner. I'll get a coat of silver on here. I'll remove this salt and I'll show that when we get to that point. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it dry, re-wet it, and sprinkle some more salt on. And then I'm going to come over with my final coat, which I've kind of mixed up this this kind of red. Let me hang this up so it can dry some more. But I've come up with this kind of red with a slight orangish tinge to it color that I'm going to use. And what I used for that was I used this Folk Art Cardinal Red, which has a nice red color to it. And then I mixed in, I think I did two parts Cardinal Red and 1 part this Pueblo color, which is kind of an orangish. You can see here, it's kind of an orange color. So gave it a little bit of that orange hue that I was looking for in it. Without it being overly orange. So anyway, I've got that mixed up and ready to go too. So the plan is let this dry a little bit more. I'm going to come over it with a coat of silver, let that dry, and then I'm going to take the salt off, re-wet it, put some more salt on it, come back over it with this final coat, and let that dry, and then take that salt off, and hopefully we'll get a nice chip effect on that front piece. So give me a little bit. I'm going to work on that, and we'll come back and see how it turns out. All right, guys, so I got the clear coat put on here. If you haven't seen my videos, you don't know what I use. I use this Duplicolor matte wheel clear coat. This is something Boyd over at Truckworks turned me on to. And I've had really good success with this. Haven't had any issues with using this with the craft paints. So that's what I use. I put a coat of that on here to make sure that I don't take off this silver when I go to put this next coat on. So basically what I do here is I take my spray bottle. It'll be all right. I'll get a little bit on the box, but it'll be okay. And I get this nice and wetted down. Shake some of the excess water off. And then I've got my bowl of salt here. And basically what I'll do is I'll just take this and I will sprinkle it on here. I like to get more on the front leading edge of this than on the rest of it because, you know, to me, if you're going to have impacts, if you're assuming that this weathering is from impacts, you're probably going to get more along the front edge there than you would along the rest of this. So I like to put a little bit more on that leading edge. All right, get a little bit more on this side here. All right, I think that'll be pretty good. I'm gonna let this dry now. You can see the salt on there. Let me focus here a little bit. Oh, focus too much. Well, there you go. You can see the salt on there. You got a little bit more on that leading edge there. So I'm gonna let this sit up and dry, and then once that's dried, I'm gonna come over it with my red that I've mixed here. And I did add a little bit more red to it. Right now I'm probably at about a 4-to-1 ratio. 4 parts of that cardinal red to 1 part of this Pueblo. So that's about where I'm at with this now. I think that should be pretty good. So it looks like it's kind of a bright color. But what I'm thinking I'm probably going to have to do is after I get this painted and the way I want to give it a little more weathering, I'm going to make a wash using this Ceramcoat brown iron oxide. So I'm going to make a wash with this and coat the entire part with it, and maybe add a little more around some of the areas where you would expect to see a little more rust or that. And we'll see how it turns out. Like I said, guys, this is kind of my first time doing with weathering. So everything's a test here. I want to practice on the printed part because I don't want to use the model parts, because if I have an issue with the printed part, let's say I can't get it cleaned back off completely, I can just reprint a new printed part. So I'd rather test it first on the printed parts and then paint the actual 1650, 1350, whatever you want to call this model. It's all up in the air at this point. But the model itself, the model kit itself, I want to paint after I'm sure and comfortable with the weathering and the techniques I'm going to use on this. So give me a little bit. I'm going to have to let this dry up for a bit. And then when we come back, I'll have this red coat painted on and we'll take the salt off and see what we look like. Stay tuned. All right, so here's the final results of the work on this part here. Let me see if I can focus a little more here. And there you go. You can see how that salt chipping method really adds to the wear and the worn look on these parts. And I think this is the cloak field coil or something, like generator coil, something. I can't remember what it's called, but it has something to do with the cloak from what I've seen on schematics. But I like the way it turned out. You see the color. I like the way the color kind of toned down. I did take a little bit of a brown wash that I made with this iron oxide and just really watered it down or thinned it out with some windshield cleaner. So thinned that down real good, and I came over and just kind of let that run over this, and it toned it down a lot. It's not too bright. I think it looks really good. And I've been working on some of these other parts as well. And you can see the front half of this one and what that salt chipping method does to that as well. And again, I've come over this with a brown wash. Mostly what I'm doing with this, you know, I was a little bit concerned or a little bit reluctant to get into weathering, because I just figured it was going to be difficult to do and difficult to learn. And it's really not that bad. This is the first time I've done weathering, and it's been pretty easy. I've got a little more to do to this. I need to get some darker colors in these panel lines here. But it's been really easy to get into. You can actually have a lot of fun with the weathering, especially on this bird of prey, because unlike, you know, the refit or most of the other ships, especially Federation ships, they're not meant to be clean. These are supposed to be beat up. These do enter atmospheres, so they're supposed to be weathered. And it's real easy to kind of get into weathering this. So some real simple techniques that I'm using. I explained briefly the salt chipping method, which I'm going to go over again because I'm going to do something a little bit different on the rest of this. The salt chipping method, and also doing a little bit of sponging, which is basically taking a piece of a sponge and cutting a little piece off here and dipping that in paint. And then I'll go over that more when we get to it. But you dip it in the paint and you basically use get as much of it off as you can, and you come along and you sponge, and it leaves kind of an uneven pattern, and it just looks real good. So anyway, I like the way this is turning out. I think the weathering is real good on it. Like I said, I've got a little more to do to this one. I've also been working on the I guess call this the command section here where the bridge is, but you can see where I've added some rusting, and again, I did the salt chipping mainly. And I've done a little bit of sponging on this as well. I don't know if the camera's picking up, but you can see a little bit of brown on here where I came back with a sponge and kind of sponged some brown on to give it a little more wear. But I really like the way these are turning out. Again, you can have a lot of fun with these. For the most part, I'm using those two methods, and then I've got some washes I'm using. And basically the washes I'm using is a a slightly different colored green from this. I don't remember which one it was. I got to look. It's either this forest green, I think. Yeah, that's the one I got up here. I think I've been using this forest green, really thinned out with some window cleaner, some glass cleaner, and also this black, thinning that out a lot, and also again the brown iron oxide. I've been thinning those out. You can see a little bit of the black in here where I've come around with it, and the brown where I've done let some streaks form. And a little more of the black back here. So the weathering really isn't that hard to do. It's a little intimidating, but once you get into it, you can really have some fun with it. So anyway, that's what I'm doing with this. I'm actually going to go over again how I'm doing the weathering, or as far as the salt chipping, because I'm going to simplify it a little bit. On the first couple of parts I did 2 different layers before I did the main color, and that was I did a black and I did a silver for like a bare metal look. And while they look good, when I look at the studio model, I really don't see a lot of the silver on the studio model. There's a couple spots, but for the most part, a lot of it is brown, not black. And I think what I'm going to do is switch things up a little bit. I had a little bit of silver later with that sponging method if I want to, but instead of putting several coats on this and having to clear coat in between each one, what I'm going to do is, this is just primed right now, and I think this is I've seen this labeled as the lower sensor dome. I'm not sure if that's canon, but I've seen it on schematics labeled as the lower sensor dome. So at any rate, what I'm going to do is, this is primered. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to put a coat of this brown iron oxide on it and let that dry. And then we'll come back, we'll put some salt on this, we'll let the salt dry, and then we'll be ready to come over it with my base coat, which is this Anita's olive green is what I'm using for my base coat. And then we can add some other colors like I did on the front here. I've got this green, and I've heard a lot of people label this as kind of a bluish gray. And it does kind of look bluish gray, but really what I did was I took this Bridgeport gray and filled this bottle halfway with it. You can see I shook it up recently, but I filled this bottle halfway, and then I put about 3 drops of my base coat olive green in there and shook it up. So it's actually the Bridgeport gray does have a little bit of blue in it itself. But I've added a couple drops of this olive green to give it kind of a greenish tint as well. So it does have a little bit, especially on this part here, and I don't know how the camera picks up, but it does have a bit of just a slight green tint to it. And that's just to kind of help blend it in with the overall color of the bird of prey, which is mostly greens. So, but it does give you a little bit of color change there. So at any rate, I'm going to get this painted up, and then we'll come back and salt it, and we'll take a look at it. So give me a minute. All right, so I've got the part painted up. This is showing up a lot darker than what it does in person. I'm looking at the viewfinder on my camera, probably because I have all the white balance turned off. But at any rate, so this is painted up. It's ready to go. And the next step I'm going to do on it is, well, first I should mention that once I painted it, because these craft paints are I don't know if you'd say water soluble, but they'll come off with some water pretty easily. So you're going to want to clear coat these after you apply them. Otherwise, the salt tends to adhere to the paint, and then when you go to remove that paint or that salt later, it's going to pull the paint off, and you're just going to have primer. So I've clear coated this and let it dry, and the next step is to put some salt on. So you saw this, I went over this briefly. I didn't really talk too much about it earlier, but you can see I've got some different, let me see if I can focus this in here. But I've got some different, it's a little bit too much, some different sized granules in here. And some of this is just from where it's gotten wet. It's caked up a little bit, and I can just break it apart with my fingertips. But basically what I use is I've got this sea salt that I picked up from Walmart, And it's got a grinder built in, so you can grind it down. If I can find the opening. You can grind it down, or you can, for this model, I've actually just taken the cap off and dumped some of this straight in there, so I've got some larger parts. Now for the 1/350 scale, I'll just use the grinded down salt, because the larger chunks will be too big for that scale. You'll lose some of the detail if you use too much of the larger chunks for that. So anyway, I've got some of this ground down and in my dish here, and all I'm going to do now is wet this down a bit. And I stole my wife's spray bottle, just don't tell her. But at any rate, so we'll just sprinkle some of this salt on and kind of randomly drop it on there. Oh, that part's a little bit too big. I'm going to get it on the sides too. And we'll get some in the front here. Shake off that excess. So that's salted now. And let me refocus here. That's got some salt on it. And so what I'm going to need to do now is I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to hit it some with my my hair dryer and kind of dry it up a little bit. But you'll know it's dry because this right now a lot of this is translucent. You can it's clear, and when it's dry it'll turn like a nice white color. So I'm going to get this dried up, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply some of my my base color here, which is the olive green. So when we come back, I'll have this color applied, and we'll talk about adding some additional color to it, and then we'll talk about some weathering. So give me a minute and we'll be back. All right, so we got the paint on, my olive paint on, and you see where I've got the salt on there. Let's see if we can focus a little bit. Yeah, you can see the salt, how it's on there. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some of this off, but not all of it. There's a couple other panels that I want to paint, but I'm not doing anything back here. So I'm just going to take a brush and kind of brush off this salt. All right. And you can see, focus again. Yep, if I can get the light to not get so bright, you can see some of that chipping from where the salt comes off, and there's a couple of spots I'm going to have to come back with a picker, something a little harsher to take it off. But you can see the kind of weathering effect that gives you on it. If I can get the light to focus, there we go. So I haven't moved any of this on top. I've got to next thing I'm going to do. Focus this again. Next thing I got to do is I'm going to mask off some of these little pie sections. You've got some little, they're kind of like little pie slices on here, and I'm going to do a combination of the gray and the lighter green, like I've got on the front here, and I'm also going to do a little bit of a wash with the red, like I did here. This one here is mixing a little bit of black with that cardinal red that I've got. So get that darkened up a little bit, and I'll do some combinations of that in this area here. And then this ring around here isn't exact. It's not exact to the studio model. The studio model looks like it has a little bit of a raised edge around here too. But this section here gets a bit of a red kind of brush to it. I could spray paint it on, but it's going to be easier just to make a wash and kind of come around this with a red, a little bit of that red and black mixed together, and just kind of make a wash out of it and come around and just do it in layers until I'm happy with the results. So give me a minute. I'm going to get these taped off and get these painted, and then we'll come back and remove the rest of the salt, and we'll make some washes. All right, so here's that part. It's all painted up, and got a little bit of red to it, just the one spot there, green. I could have done a little more red or gray, but it's not, you don't want this whole thing overloaded with colors. It's supposed to look like a patchwork, I guess. So at any rate, talk about the colors that I use, because I've changed my mixtures just a little bit. For this lighter green, or this, yeah, lighter green, I'm using a combination of this forest green, Ceramcoat forest green. There we go. And I'm actually doing 3 parts Ceramcoat forest green, and then I am doing 1 part of this Ceramcoat Bridgeport gray, just to kind of dull this down. Maybe 2 parts. It might have been 2 parts of Bridgeport gray to tone it down. But if you decide to go this route, you know, just try it out and see which one is to your liking. But it was about 3 parts green to 1 to 2 parts of this gray, and it just kind of lightened it up just a little bit. You could see a little bit of the difference between those two. Just a little bit lighter, not a whole lot. Now I haven't clear coated this yet, and that's going to make this a little bit darker when I do. So maybe I might go a little bit lighter with it next time, because this is supposed to be a little bit lighter of a green. So at any rate, with the Bridgeport gray, or with the gray, I made up a little mixture here, and that was I believe 3 parts Bridgeport gray and 1 to 2 parts of the olive green added in, just to kind of tone it a little bit darker, but and just give a little bit, I don't know if it comes up on camera, but just the slightest green tint to it when you look at it. Not much, but it still kind of looks like a bluish gray too. So some people would look at that and say it's a bluish gray. But at any rate, that's the mixture I used for that. And then for the red, I did 3 or 4 parts of this Cardinal Red by Folk Art, and 1 part, just 1 drop of this Deco Art Black. Now you can do that with any red and black, but those are the 2 that I've used. And of course, all these mixtures, whenever I do them, I got some glass cleaner here that I thin them out with. So I got this all sprayed. I used just plain Bridgeport gray for this this whole part right around here that's supposed to be gray, or it's kind of hard to tell if it's gray or silver in the pictures. I've seen a couple of other people paint theirs this light gray, so I figured I'd just do it light gray. It's not supposed to, Bird of Prey is not really supposed to be shiny, you know, so I didn't really want to do silver there. To me, it would just look out of place. So I just did this a light gray. And now the fun part comes. We get to weather these up some. So basically what I do is I just make my washes, and I'm only going to do 2 washes on this. I did kind of a green wash for the top part here, but I didn't use it that much. I only used it in a couple of spots, so I don't really need it. So I think what I'm going to do is just make up a wash of this brown, and this is the Ceramcoat brown iron oxide, and I don't need a lot of this, so probably 2 drops. And then we are also going to do some black wash. So again, don't need a whole lot of this, so this drop's coming out a little bit smaller, so probably do about 3 or 4 drops of that. And then I'm just going to take my glass cleaner here, and I'm going to put quite a bit in here because I want it to be a wash, so I want it to be thinned out some. Well, not just some, I want it to be thinned out quite a bit. So mix that up. And you want it, or I want it at least, to where when I run up the cup, it runs. So I can use this in some of these little crevices and that, and just kind of let it run down and do some wear that way. But I think that one's good. And then we'll do a little bit of this brown here. And I'm not too worried about cleaning the brushes in between using these because I want them to be dirty. This model, is the good thing about weathering it is that it's supposed to be a dirty ship. You know, the Klingons don't care about washing stuff and, you know, cleaning it up and making it look pretty and that. So I think that one's good too. So, all right, so I think we've got those. And now you just get to do the fun part. So there's really no good studio pictures of the studio model of this. Very limited view of this in all the photos I found of the studio model. So basically I'm just going to do what I think looks good, or what I think looks right. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some brown. And one thing to keep in mind too is the orientation, and I kind of forget that with this, but the orientation of these parts when it's going to be on the model. You don't want to hold it like this and paint it, because when the streaks run down in spots, it's not going to look right, because it's going to be running up towards the top of the ship instead of kind of running down like, you know, like it's rust and it's kind of weathering there. So just keep that in mind when you paint these, or when you do the weathering on them. I'm just going to put a little bit of brown around these just to kind of give it a look like there's rust forming in there. Got a little spot of rust here, so I'm going to kind of let that just run down a little bit. So it's really up to you what you want to do as far as weathering these. I usually just kind of at random just pick little spots to do a little bit of rust to it and let it kind of run down. Like I said, the pictures of the studio model that I have, I use them as a guide, not as a rule. So it kind of gives me an idea of what the weathering kind of looks like on the studio model. And when I get there's good images of it, you know, I can kind of sit there and figure out just how I want to do this weathering on this. But again, don't want to overdo it, but I'm just going to go around a couple spots and do a little bit of rusting look to it. Anyway, I mean, that pretty much gives you an idea, guys. That's what I'm doing here. Just dirtying it up a bit, giving it a bit of a dirty look. More black. And like I said, how you want to do it's completely up to you. As far as how dirty you want your model, to, your bird of prey to look. And that's pretty much up to you. So you get the idea of what I'm doing here. You kind of see of course it's still wet, but just dirty it up whatever way you feel like. And there's no right or wrong to it really. So, but that's pretty much it, guys. That's pretty much all I want to go over, was kind of just what I'm doing with this weathering. I did talk about sponging a bit. And let me see. I've got this sponge, but it's all dried out right now. But for this sponging, I'll show that real quick. Just cut a little piece of sponge off. Don't need a lot, just a little piece. And I've also used cotton for this too, but so you just get some paint on there, and I should have, I don't know where my paper towel's at, so I'm just going to dab it on here. But you want to get some of this off, and you just come around and kind of dab it in spots. And it just kind of adds like a random little pattern there. So, but I mean, basically that's the simple explanation of sponging. You just take a little bit of sponge, get a little paint, dab off some of it so you don't get a big splotch of it, and you just dab it around your part there, and you can see a little bit of, looks like a little bit of rust there. So anyway, that's just a quick run through of that one, but that's pretty much all I want to talk about, guys. We'll just go over a couple simple weathering techniques for this bird of prey. And like I said, I'll be doing it pretty much the same thing on the 1/350 scale when I get started on that. I'm still waiting for a couple parts to come in so I can get started on it, so I can do kind of the introductory video to that build. And I'm going to try to keep these separated out as much as possible as far as this model and then the actual 1/350, in case people just want to case you just want to see the 1350 and not this model, or maybe you want to see this model and not the 1350. That way you don't have to watch the whole episode to see both of them. So I may intermix them some, but I'm going to try to keep these split up a little bit. But I'll be referring to this one as Big Bird, and the 1350 will be Little Bird. So that's how you'll be able to tell which video is which. So at any rate, I think it's looking come along pretty good. A little more work to do on it, but I've got some details to paint as well as doing the weathering. So, but anyway, guys, appreciate you watching. Thank you everybody for the support, and thank you for subscribing to these videos. It really lets me know that people are getting some use out of them, or at least being somewhat entertained, or maybe just amused. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Until next time, keep modeling.